All right, so you're interested in the company, right? Maybe thinking about investing.
Yeah.
But you don't want to wade through tons of reports and articles, right?
Exactly. You want the key stuff, the insights, the analysis, but,
Ah.
without the overwhelm.
And that is what we're here for. This is the deep dive. Today we're diving deep into Novavax. That's NVAX for you ticker tape watchers. We've got a really in-depth stock research report, and we even found one of their ads too, just to get a feel for how they present themselves to the public.
And our goal is to distill all this information down, just for you. We want to give you a clear, concise picture of what Novavax is all about.
Think of it as like your cheat sheet to understanding this company and its potential. So we'll be covering a lot of ground today. We'll be looking at how Novavax is actually making money, the team running the show, their financials, and of course, how the market is viewing them.
We'll also look at who owns the company, where the risks and opportunities lie, and try to give you a sense of where Novavax might be headed.
We split this deep dive into two parts. First up, we're going to tackle Novavax's business model, their management team, and their financial health. Then after a short break, we'll get into market sentiment, ownership structure, and a full risk assessment.
And stick with us until the very end. We've got a really thought-provoking question for you to consider, one that could change your whole perspective on Novavax.
Okay, let's kick things off with Chapter 1, Business Understanding.
The first thing that jumps out is that Novavax is really going through a major shift in strategy. They're moving away from directly selling their COVID-19 vaccine and going all in on research and development and partnerships. For 2025, they're expecting that most of their revenue, like $300 to $350 million, will come from licensing, royalties, and other revenue streams tied to these partnerships. So it's not just a small change, it's a whole new way of doing business.
And a huge part of this is their partnership with Sanofi. That seems like a pretty big deal. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So starting with the 2025-2026 flu season, Sanofi will be the one selling Novavax's COVID-19 vaccine in major markets like the US and Europe, and Novavax will be getting tiered royalties in return, somewhere in the high teens to low 20s%. But it goes even further. They're also working together to develop combination vaccines, like a single shot that would cover both COVID-19 and other illnesses that Sanofi has vaccines for. And these combination vaccines will be using Novavax's proprietary Matrix-M adjuvant. So that opens up a whole new stream of potential income with future milestone payments and more royalties.
So you've mentioned this Matrix-M adjuvant a few times now. It sounds pretty important. What exactly is it?
It's a really key piece of their technology. It basically supercharges your immune response to the vaccine, so you could potentially get better protection with smaller doses.
Interesting. So it seems like Novavax is making a trade-off here. They're giving up the reg control of sales, but they could gain broader market reach and lower their risk, right?
Yeah, exactly. By partnering, they don't have to worry as much about building a huge sales force, managing distribution, all those headaches. But of course, now a lot depends on how well their partners perform. And speaking of partners, let's not forget that Sanofi paid them a hefty $500 million upfront last year. That's being spread out as revenue through 2026, with about $35 million expected to be recognized this year. So they're not exactly starting from scratch financially.
Right. So that gives us a good overview of their business model. Let's shift gears and talk about their actual products and services. What's Novavax selling right now and what's in their pipeline?
Right now, their main product is, of course, their COVID-19 vaccine. It's available as Nuvaxovid in Europe and Novavax COVID-19 vaccine, adjuvanted in the US. And they've updated it for the 2024-2025 season to target the JN.1 variant. But they've also got some promising stuff in development. They have a COVID-19 influenza combination vaccine in phase 3 trials. That's a big one to watch.
That combination vaccine sounds pretty interesting. If that works out, it would be so much easier for people to just get one shot. What else is in their pipeline?
Well, they also have a standalone seasonal flu vaccine that's also in phase 3. And in the earlier stages, they're working on RSV combinations, a vaccine for H5N1 avian flu, the bird flu, and even some preclinical research for shingles and C. difficile. So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
And you mentioned earlier that their Matrix-M adjuvant could be valuable for other companies too, right?
Exactly. That adjuvant could be licensed out to other companies for use in their own vaccines. It could be a big revenue generator down the line.
So where does Novavax fit in the grand scheme of things? How big are they compared to the big pharma players?
Well, they're definitely a smaller biotech company. They're based in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and their market cap is currently estimated to be somewhere between $965.1 million and $1.2 billion. But, that can change quickly, especially in this market. It's important to remember that they were a bit late to the COVID-19 vaccine party compared to companies like Pfizer and Moderna. And as we've talked about, Sanofi is taking the lead on selling their COVID-19 vaccine in key markets starting in the next flu season.
And they sold off one of their manufacturing facilities too, right?
Yeah, they sold their facility in the Czech Republic to Novo Nordisk for $200 million. That'll help them streamline operations and cut costs. So, it's clear they're trying to focus more on R&D and less on the complexities of large-scale manufacturing and distribution.
Okay, so let's sum it up. What is Novavax's main selling point? What's their unique value proposition?
Well, their bread and butter is their recombinant protein-based nanoparticle vaccine technology. And when you combine that with their Matrix-M adjuvant, you get some pretty powerful, long-lasting immune responses. They really see themselves as innovators tackling global health challenges. And the fact that they offer a non-mRNA COVID-19 vaccine, that's important for some people who are wary of the newer mRNA technology. Their pipeline is targeting some big unmet needs in the healthcare market, and they're smart about leveraging partnerships to maximize their reach and impact. So their technology, their adjuvant, and their partnership strategy, those are their big advantages.
All right, let's move on to Chapter 2, Management Evaluation. Who's at the helm of Novavax?
Well, the captain of the ship is John C. Jacobs. He's been president and CEO since January of 2023. He's a seasoned veteran in the pharmaceutical industry. Over 25 years of experience, everything from commercial strategy to business management. He was the CEO of Harmony Biosciences before this, led them through their IPO. And before that, he held senior roles at some big names: Teva, Cephalon, Wyeth, Pfizer. The guy knows the industry inside and out.
So he's got the experience, but what kind of impact has he had on Novavax specifically?
Well, he's the one who spearheaded this whole new strategy, this move towards R&D and partnerships, really focusing on their core technology platform and making smart alliances. The Sanofi deal is a prime example of that. And he's also been very proactive on the financial front, implementing cost-cutting measures and, of course, overseeing the sale of that Czech Republic facility.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's been a driving force behind Novavax's transformation.
Now, every company faces challenges. How has Novavax's management team dealt with any recent hurdles or crises? That can really tell you a lot about leadership.
Well, they definitely had some bumps in the road. Remember, they were a little late to the COVID-19 vaccine market. Scaling up manufacturing and getting through all the regulatory hoops, that took longer than expected.
Right.
And then last October, the FDA slapped a clinical hold on their IND applications for their COVID-19 influenza combination vaccine and their standalone flu vaccine. There was a report of a serious adverse event in a phase 2 trial, so the FDA hit the pause button.
Wow, that's never good news. How did management handle that situation?
They actually responded really well. They worked closely with the FDA, provided all the data they needed, and managed to get the hold lifted the very next month. So that shows they take safety seriously, and they know how to navigate the regulatory process, which is absolutely critical in this industry.
And how transparent is Novavax's management? How well do they communicate with investors and the public?
Pretty good, actually. They put out regular press releases, keep everyone updated on their financials, operations, and strategy. And the management team is always out there, participating in conferences, answering questions, being visible. They also do regular conference calls and webcasts. And their investor relations website is packed with presentations, reports, SEC filings, you name it. They even publish global spending reports. So, yeah, I'd say they're pretty transparent.
What about their ethical track record? Anything noteworthy there?
Well, they've got a code of business conduct that's publicly available, and they publish a UK Modern Slavery Act statement, so they seem to be taking human rights in their supply chain seriously. There was some controversy a while back about the use of fetal cell lines in their COVID-19 vaccine research, but Novavax clarified that those cell lines were only used in early-stage research, not in the actual manufacturing process. Now, they did have a securities litigation issue that was settled for $47 million. Allegations of misleading statements about their COVID-19 vaccine approval timeline, so that's something to keep in mind. But overall, they seem to have a decent ethical framework in place.
All right, let's talk money. Chapter 3, Financial Health. What are the key numbers telling us about Novavax's financial situation?
Well, as of late March, their market cap is estimated to be somewhere between $965.1 million and $1.2 billion. But the bigger story is their revenue. For 2024, they brought in $682 million, but that was a 31% drop compared to the year before. And in Q4 of 2024 alone, revenue plunged 70% year over year. So yeah, there's a definite downward trend there.
Yikes, that's a steep drop. So what about their profitability? What are their profit margins looking like?
Their gross profit margin was actually pretty healthy, around 70% for 2024, so their product itself can be quite profitable. The problem is their operating expenses are eating into those profits. Their operating margin for Q3 2024 was negative 95%.
Ouch, yeah. And it's expected to be negative for the whole year.
Ouch is right.
Their net profit margin was also negative 27.5% for 2024.
Yeah.
So they're losing money. And if you look at their debt-to-equity ratio, it was negative 0.272 as of December 34, 2024. So their liabilities are greater than their assets, not a great sign. And their free cash flow was negative too. So yeah, they're definitely facing some financial hurdles.
It sounds like the product itself could be profitable, but they've got some other issues weighing them down. Exactly. The decline in revenue is a big factor. Demand for COVID-19 vaccines is down, and they're in the midst of this big business model transition. So that all plays a role. Their gross profit margin is solid, but they need to get those operating expenses under control if they want to turn things around, and their balance sheet needs some serious work.
What about their financial stability over the long term? Have they been consistently profitable?
Not really. Their earnings have been all over the place in the past 5 to 10 years, mostly losses, except for that spike during the height of the pandemic, no consistent profitability. And they don't pay dividends either, which is pretty typical for a biotech company that's pouring money into research. They're trying to manage their debt, of course. The asset sale and the Sanofi upfront payment helped, but their working capital is also negative. More short-term liabilities than assets, so there are some potential cash flow issues there. Overall, I'd say their financial stability is a big question mark right now. The Sanofi deal and the asset sale are steps in the right direction, but it remains to be seen if they can achieve consistent profitability.
All right, so before we jump into the second half of our deep dive, where we'll be covering market sentiment, ownership, and risk, I wanted to take a quick minute to talk about how you can get this level of insightful analysis on any stock whenever you need it. So imagine, right? Imagine being able to generate detailed reports, in-depth podcasts, even engaging videos like this one on any stock, anytime you want.
And not just generic reports. I mean, imagine getting analysis that's customized to your specific level of knowledge that dives as deep as you want it to go in all the key areas we cover here.
Well, that's exactly what we're building at stockanalytics.ai. We're developing this very capability right now, and not just that, we're creating an interactive platform where you can ask specific questions about the stock we're discussing. You'll be able to use a voice-controlled stock screener for your own research, and we're even building a powerful portfolio analyzer to help you de-risk and stress test your investments.
It's all about empowering you to make informed decisions with confidence.
So head over to stockanalytics.ai today and check out our comprehensive demo. You can see the power of this technology firsthand, and we've just opened the waiting list for beta users. You can get a 50% discount. And there's even an opportunity to invest in the future of financial intelligence.
That's stockanalytics.ai. Don't miss out.
And now, back to our Novavax deep dive. Okay, so let's move on to Chapter 4, Market Sentiment. What's the overall feeling out there about Novavax stock right now?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. There's some cautious optimism, mostly because of the Sanofi partnership, but there's also a lot of skepticism. The stock price has been pretty volatile, which is not unusual for a biotech company going through a major strategic shift, especially in a market like vaccines where there's so much uncertainty. And the fact that there's high short interest in the stock tells you that a lot of investors are betting on it going down.
What are the analysts saying? What kind of price targets are they setting?
Analyst ratings are generally positive. The consensus is a buy, but their price targets are all over the map. Some are as low as $8 or $9 a share, while others are as high as $25 to $35. The average is somewhere in the $16 to $23 range. So they seem to think there's upside potential, but there's a lot of disagreement about how much. And there have been some recent downgrades and price target reductions, probably because of concerns about their near-term financials and the risks of executing this new strategy.
How much does news and events move the needle on Novavax's stock price?
Quite a bit, actually. Good news, like positive updates on the Sanofi collaboration, good clinical trial results, or earnings that beat expectations. Even if revenue is still down overall, that usually gives the stock a boost. On the flip side, any negative news, like the clinical hold we talked about, or any downward revisions to their revenue outlook, that tends to send the stock price tumbling. And even things happening in the broader biotech and pharma sectors, big regulatory announcements, FDA stuff, that can also have an impact on Novavax.
So what does the high short interest, coupled with options trading activity, tell you about overall sentiment?
Well, the high short interest means there's a significant group of investors betting against the stock. And that creates the potential for a short squeeze if there's some really good news that forces those short sellers to buy back the stock. That can push the price up pretty quickly. And the fact that there's an active options market for Novavax tells you that there's a lot of speculative interest in the stock. Some people are using options to hedge their bets, while others are just trying to make a quick buck on price swings. It's a risky game.
Right, right. Let's move on to Chapter 5. Ownership structure. Who are the major players holding Novavax stock?
Institutional investors own a big chunk of the company, somewhere around 63–64%. The biggest holders are the usual suspects, big investment firms like Vanguard, BlackRock, and Shaw Capital. So they're definitely keeping a close eye on Novavax, and their trading activity can really move the stock price.
What about the insiders, the management team and board members? How much skin in the game do they have?
Insider ownership is pretty low, less than 2%. And lately, there's been more insider selling than buying. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. Sometimes people sell for personal financial reasons. But investors do tend to pay attention to insider transactions as a potential gauge of management's confidence in the company.
Is ownership concentrated among a few big players, or is it more spread out?
It's pretty concentrated. The top 25 institutional holders control over 60% of the outstanding shares. So when those big players make a move, it can really shake things up.
Have there been any recent changes in Novavax's corporate governance structure that you think are worth noting?
Yeah, there have been a few. They appointed a new chair of the board, Margaret McGlynn, who has a lot of experience in the vaccine world. And they also brought on a new independent director, John Shiver, who's got a strong background in vaccine and biologics development. So these changes in board leadership could impact the company's strategy, oversight, and relationships with stakeholders. They also have established corporate governance policies and board committees, all the usual stuff for a publicly traded company.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of risk assessment with a good old SWOT analysis. Chapter 6. Let's start with the good stuff. What are Novavax's strengths?
Well, their biggest strength is their recombinant protein nanoparticle vaccine technology. It's a proven platform. And then there's their Matrix-M adjuvant, which we've talked about. That's a real differentiator. It enhances immune responses and could potentially reduce the amount of vaccine needed. They've also got a lot of experience developing vaccines for various infectious diseases, not just COVID. And their COVID-19 vaccine has the advantage of being stable at refrigerator temperatures, which makes logistics easier.
Okay, good stuff. Now, what about their weaknesses? Where are they vulnerable?
Their financial situation is definitely a weakness. They've got a history of losses, negative stockholders' equity, negative working capital. All those are red flags. They were also late to the COVID-19 game, and they're heavily reliant on Sanofi now for commercialization. And then there's the stock itself. It's volatile, and there's a lot of short interest, which reflects the market's concerns.
So what opportunities are out there for Novavax? What could they potentially capitalize on?
Well, the global vaccine market is still growing, so that's a tailwind. And their COVID-19 influenza combination vaccine, if it pans out, that could be huge. Their Matrix-M adjuvant also has licensing potential, as we've seen with the Sanofi deal. And they've got that non-mRNA COVID-19 vaccine option, which appeals to a certain segment of the population. And there are always opportunities for more partnerships to leverage their technology and pipeline.
And what about threats? What are the biggest challenges they're facing?
Well, the vaccine market is super competitive, and they're up against some really big established players. And the demand for COVID-19 vaccines is going down. Getting regulatory approvals is always a hurdle. There's the negative market sentiment we talked about with all that short interest. And government healthcare policies can always change, which could impact their business. And of course, there's always the inherent risk of safety concerns or unforeseen side effects with any vaccine. That's just the nature of the industry.
Okay, let's wrap things up with Chapter 7. Brief conclusion. So, what's the bottom line here? What's your overall assessment of Novavax?
We're looking at a company that's at a crossroads. They're in the midst of a major transformation. They've got some real strengths. Their technology is good, and that adjuvant is valuable. But they're facing some serious financial challenges in a highly competitive market. The Sanofi partnership is going to be key to their future.
Those financial issues are pretty concerning, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The losses, the negative equity, the negative working capital, that's not something to ignore. They really need to figure out how to become consistently profitable. The market sentiment is all over the place. People are excited about their pipeline, especially that combination vaccine and the potential for more licensing deals with the Matrix-M adjuvant. But they're also worried about the declining demand for COVID-19 vaccines and all the competition they're facing.
So what's your take on the overall risk-reward picture for Novavax?
While the risks are definitely significant, they're not financially stable, and there's a lot of uncertainty about their new strategy and how those partnerships will play out. But there's also potential for a big payoff if their pipeline is successful and the partnerships deliver. So it's a high risk, high reward situation. If you're thinking about investing in Novavax, you really need to do your homework and be prepared for some volatility. Keep a close eye on their financials, watch their progress with regulatory approvals, and see how that collaboration with Sanofi is actually performing.
Now, for that final thought we promised you. Thinking about everything we've discussed today, given Novavax's unique technology and their strategic shift, what do you think is the single most important factor that will determine their long-term success or failure in the world of vaccines? It's a question worth pondering. And there's no easy answer. And that concludes our deep dive into Novavax. If you enjoyed this analysis and want to hear more like it, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive wherever you get your podcasts. We've got plenty more deep dives coming your way.
And for even more insights and analysis, make sure you subscribe to the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel. We're always putting out new content to help you navigate the markets.
And finally, just a reminder that this was just one analysis based on the research we discussed today. And we used AI tools to help us process and synthesize all that information. This is not financial advice. You should always do your own research and make investment decisions based on your own individual circumstances and risk tolerance.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.